Welcome to the opening act of day 3 of ICF India Coaching Conclave 2022. We've had two fulfilling and fun-filled days covering topics related to emotions, feelings, voice, parental coaching, organizational coaching, civil services coaching, and a whole range of topics around them. Today also promises to keep you engrossed with some excellent sessions, experiential pods, quizzes, and finally the culmination with the Gala Coaching Awards night. My name is Krishna Praveen. I'm the host for your session today. A very quick introduction about myself. I am from ICF Hyderabad chapter and I'm on the board handling the membership responsibility. Today's session is actually a masterclass on why you should create your own business. Now, many of you would have been contemplating to take the plunge or almost at the cusp of taking the plunge of starting a business. There probably are some of you who are already on the entrepreneurship path. This session is for all of you, and it will be facilitated by Mr. Narinder Singh, and he will cover his views and experiences on starting the business and sustaining it. Let me give you an introduction about Mr. Narinder Singh. Narinder Singh made the difficult transition from being employed to becoming an entrepreneur about 26 years ago. He co-founded Utopia Global Inc., a company headquartered in Chicago, and with a focus of becoming a SAP solution software partner for Software 100 companies. Utopia had a presence in about 7 countries along with its subsidiaries. In late 2020, Utopia was acquired by Prometheus Group, a portfolio company of Genstar Capital, a leading private equity firm with around 19 billion USD in equity. Prior to Utopia, Narinder founded Avina Resources, a pioneer in implementing accounting software for SMEs. Narinder is now in Singapore, works with startups and founders, coaching them, mentoring them, and helping them grow. Narinder also leads his family's philanthropic work. They help school-going children with scholarships and are working with a school in Pilani, Rajasthan, to upgrade their academic and digital infrastructure. Quite a resume. Ladies and gentlemen, recommend you to rid all your distractions and get engrossed in today's session. And without any further ado, let me welcome on stage Mr. Narinder Singh and hand the baton over to him.
This is a very quick look at the agenda that I thought we would cover today. We'd obviously go through an introduction which has largely happened. I have a few other things to just share with you as we go along. I'm going to cover what possible motivations to launch your business could be, and different people have different ones, obviously. I'll then get into a little bit more of the practical side of your business. So assuming that you have made the decision to go ahead, what is it that some of the things that you could do to get your business off the ground? And I think in many businesses, there is not enough focus on cash flow. So I'm going to touch on that briefly. And finally, coming towards whether you should, once your business is successful, does it make sense to sell it? So with that, I'll get started with that. And like I said, we'll have discussion and Q&A. Now we could have it at the end of every slide if that is what is, and if you have questions, and then we can also have it towards the end. So this is just a quick introduction about myself, and one term I like to use is that in my case, I have turned from employee to entrepreneur. And I think many people in this group might have already done that. Your coaches, you're already doing that. I also think that if for me personally, it was a burning desire to make that transition from employee to entrepreneur. I have so far done three ventures. 2 of them were successful. I would say the first and the third were successful. The second wasn't. And I'm happy to say that I learned a lot even from the one that wasn't successful. And I think sometimes we get overawed if we fail, but I am happy to share that I learned a lot from them. Just a word about myself. I have a master's in physics from BITS Pilani and an MBA from XLRI. I'm not sure how much of the physics I used, but I did end up using the MBA part of it. I started back in India with Hindustan Lever, as it was called then. Now it's called Hindustan Unilever. And then subsequently, I've lived in Dubai I moved, my first move was to Dubai. And then for the last more than 2 decades, I've been living in Singapore. I co-founded Utopia Global in 2003, and we exited it very successfully at the peak of COVID in 2020. An interesting highlight of that exit is that the entire transaction from initial contact to sale, everything was done on Zoom. And us two co-founders never met the acquirers in person. So if there is one use case for Zoom, I can assure you that that case is that you can sell a company over Zoom. I'm now an angel investor and a mentor to startup founders. I do work with a number of startups, particularly tech-based startups in Singapore right now. And I must say that it is one of the most fulfilling parts of my post-Utopia sort of professional life. And I realized that not only I am able to contribute to their growth, but I think they end up teaching me, as the word sometimes used is reverse mentoring. I actually learn a lot from them. For example, I have invested in a company which is into blockchain and NFTs. And I don't think I knew anything about that until I invested with them and learned from those young entrepreneurs as to what they are doing. So it's definitely a two-way street. I'm going to share just a few photos of Utopia to show what our journey was. The one on the left shows the early founding team, the 4 of us who got started. And this is a photo we took in India, in Delhi, actually, when we were getting started. Then we had a tradition of giving long service awards to our colleagues and employees. And that's another photo. We were very fortunate that out of the 18 years that we owned and ran Utopia, we had lots of colleagues who lasted with us for even more than 10 years. The number of people who were with us for 5, 10, 15, 18 years was large, and they formed the backbone of our company. These two photos are really, for those of you who are from the SAP world would know that SAP does an annual Sapphire show every year in Orlando in summer, and we joined that. So the photo on the left is when it was just a few of us wearing those ghastly yellow yellow shirts to make ourselves stand out at a small booth. And the one on the right shows how we looked in 2019, which was the last show that we attended prior to COVID. So it in some ways, in a physical way, reflects the growth of the company over a 15-year period. In addition to everything that we did at work, I think we also learned to enjoy along the way. And this is our Bangalore office, all of us celebrating Onam, and we would celebrate pretty much all the Indian festivals. And that kept us going, I think, on a social side. We also got into philanthropy at, I would say, at a relatively early stage of our company. And the photo on the left shows you a bunch of school children, about close to 70 of them in our office back in 2007. And these children were, I mean, there's a small story I can share that we used to have a guest house in Koramangala, and the office was also in Koramangala. And one day I was walking from the guest house to the office, and I saw a lot of school children go sort of in the opposite direction. And some of them were either not wearing good shoes or wearing chappals and going to school, and it was somewhat slushy, so even their feet were getting dirty. So I was a little bit sort of, you sort of form an image of that, and it haunted me the whole day. And I finally started checking around with our admin team here, do you know where these children could be from? And it turned out they were living fairly close to our office. And one of our security guards was actually also living there. So we reached out through the security guard and said, look, could we buy shoes for your children? And we were a bit hesitant in offering it because we didn't know what the reaction would be. But we got a very good reaction, and we arranged 70 pairs of shoes for school-going children and even for toddlers. So it was very interesting that we had a big turnout when we did that. And I think it encouraged us a lot. Subsequently, we started doing that in the US also. And on the right-hand side, you can see we were volunteering at a food pantry in Vegas when we were there for our sales conference. So I'll sort of stop here. KP, I see that you're on. Is there anything that you would, are there any questions or anything?
Yeah, already some questions have come in, Narinder. So people are asking, what learnings did you get from your failed venture? And
Okay.
how big really was Utopia when it was acquired by the private equity firm?
Okay, sure. Happy to answer that. So in terms of the failed venture, I think there were a couple of things that stood out for me on the failed venture. And I'll mention 2 or 3 of them. The first one was that that venture was in Singapore, and since I was new to IT, I thought, okay, let me start by getting into system integration, which was basically hardware, and became like an IBM business partner, HP business partner, started selling system integration services. And I thought later I realized that that was such a crowded market, and there was very little to differentiate my company's business from another's other than price and maybe availability. And I think that message was driven home. And I finally, by the way, had to shut that company down. So it drove home to me the message that that going into a crowded market with no differentiation is the worst thing you can do. Now, later, when I come to some other slides, I'll talk about how you can have differentiation. And differentiation is not just in being totally unique in the market that you're so new, but it could be in so many other ways. So that was one lesson. I think the second lesson, which also I'll talk about in some subsequent slides, is cash flow. I was a new young entrepreneur and still partly in a job, partly in business. And I signed up to then start selling software, accounting software. And the accounting software owner said to me that, look, you need to buy 3 packages every month. And, we sell so many, it's okay. So I had a contract which forced me to buy 3 packages of software every month on the assumption that I can sell it to customers. That killed my cash flow because it took time to ramp up. We could not sell. So we would collect 3 boxes. In those days, it was boxes, not downloads. So we would collect 3 boxes from this company every month, and we basically ran out of money. And that's the other lesson I learned. And I think the third lesson I learned was legal terms. Make sure you read the contracts carefully. And I think in the end, there was one legal term that I had inserted into the contract which saved us. But that's a long story. So that was first part of the question that you asked. The second one was, how big was Utopia? So we were about $75 million in annual revenue. We were very profitable. We were 650 people spread across 7 countries. But out of the 650, about 350 were in Bangalore because we ran all our back office, IT, finance, HR, and of course, not all, but most of delivery from there. But we did have about 300 people in other parts of the world who were our project managers, who were our salespeople, solutions people. And we were, so in some ways, we had 2 head offices. We had a head office in Chicago and we had a head office in Bangalore. And so the Bangalore was the back office, Chicago was the front office. One thing that I'm very proud of is that even though we were a very small company relative to the big guys, we were one of 30 companies in the world from whom SAP accepted product. So our product around master data governance was accepted by SAP as a SAP line item with our name on it, and SAP salespeople could sell that as if it was an SAP product. And they have done that only from 30 companies. So we felt very proud of that. I sometimes used to joke that my reseller is SAP, and used to get a big kick out of saying that. And we had a really nice relationship with SAP, which I think was supremely helpful. Anything else, KP?
No,
Anything else?
There are other questions, but I think we'll save them for the end of the session.
Okay, thank you. So this is the interesting part as to why launch your own business, and I'm going to cover in some ways my reasons, and hopefully some of them could be your reasons as well. So for me, it was really a passion to create something from scratch. It was just that burning desire that instead of working for somebody else on somebody else's business plan, can I create something? To me, it was more than anything else, it was a creative process. That and I went so far as to think that, look, I don't want to come to the end of my career and have this regret that I didn't even try. And I was so keen on it that I was willing to tell my wife, look, I'd rather try and fail than not try at all. So that was my reason for trying it. I also think that it allows you to take charge of yourself and your destiny. And so many of us who have worked in or are currently working in large companies, they don't have to be MNC, they can be large companies, they could be large SMEs. Your life really depends on the decisions that your top management makes. And many times a bad decision by your top management sitting thousands of miles away could mean shutting down a business, shutting down a market, and getting retrenched. And I think it has become pretty common now. And again, as I said, there are push factors and pull factors. In my case, one of the push factors was I did not want to be 55 and be laid off. And I was to think to myself, look, at 55, all my financial responsibilities are going to be peaking. My children are going to be going to university, and that's not cheap. And finding a second job at 55 is going to be difficult. So for me, it was both a push and a pull factor. But I do think that taking charge of your life and destiny was a very important part for me. A few other, I think, entrepreneurship or business ownership, whatever you call it, does create options which you do not get as easily as an employee. Now, if you're a very senior employee in a large company, I think there are many options that you do get. But if not, if you're running your own business, you could actually even do not only when it is successful, afford to give a better life to your family and children, but I think it can also open options like if you wanted to resettle in another country, you wanted to get a permanent residence somewhere, those kind of things with your own business become more possible. Or even if you stay within your country, you can choose where you want to live, how you want to live, things like that. So it does open a lot of different options. There's the last bullet on the lower right, which says be financially independent, especially when job security is an oxymoron. I think if I were to look at it almost like, the difference between job security and business insecurity. There was a time when job security used to be pretty high, and to start a business was very risky. I sort of think of it like that. But I think job security has gone down. So basically job insecurity has gone up, and starting a business has become easier. And there are reasons why for both. So job insecurity has gone up because of market pressures, because companies are more prone to laying off now or reorganizing, the nice word. So that is higher than it was, say, 20 years ago. And starting a business has actually become easier. So the gap between leaving a job and starting your business has reduced. And that doesn't mean that business isn't still a more risky venture. Business is inherently more risky, but there's a lot more support systems that are now available, including as you're participating today in the Coaching Federation. So you have coaches available, you have entrepreneurs, you have other things, there's a whole range of accelerators who have come up, who start with even matchmaking co-founders and helping you with your business plan and helping you with the legal framework. And there are so many of them around the world, including India and Singapore. And I think all that has overall reduced the risk that a business used to have. I think financially also there is more available to start a business. And I think one of the things that we often forget is, particularly for us as Indians, the knowledge economy has been a big boon for us. And if you look at almost all the new businesses that you see which came up in the last 20 to 30 years are knowledge businesses. And pretty much all of them were started with very little capital other than your brain capital. So I think all that has worked in favor of the the highly educated Indian community, and I see that it has overall reduced the risk of starting a business.
Narinder, there's one comment actually about this, the whole age, when it's the right age to start, right? Is there really a sweet spot in life where you can really start a business? There's a comment that 50 now seems to be quite often referred as the spot. Is there really a spot like that?
So I think I'm sort of inclined to say, how long is a piece of string kind of answer. It's very hard to give that answer, and I'll give you a few examples. So firstly, I don't think it is the age of the business owner that is important. I think it is the timing and where in your life cycle, professional life cycle you are. How good an idea do you have, and how passionate are you about it? That's one answer. The other thing that I'm seeing is that there are more and more younger people willing to start a business either straight out of college, which was unthinkable, or maybe after working for 3 or 4 years then starting. And I'm sharing a real life example. I had our lawyer in US introduced us to a young Indian couple who had sold their company in the US around the same time that we sold Utopia. So the lawyer was common. And this couple decided to move to Singapore with all the money that they made. So they made a few $1 million. And they're only 31 years old. They're a husband and wife team. They're 31 years old. And they're moving with their money to Singapore. And so that is one example. On the other hand, you have people in their 50s, 60s doing that. So I think the important thing is, when you get the right idea, at what stage can you do that? I do think you need some ability to be financially independent, at least for like a 1.5 to 2 year period before your business takes off. So I would go by more those parameters rather than what is the right age. The right time that suits you is the right age, but I'm seeing more and more people starting younger and younger.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to share a few things that I learned along that, and what are some of the things you could do to get your business off the ground. So one of the first things I sometimes talk and sort of comment on is that, look, you have to start somewhere, and it doesn't have to be the biggest thing, like you have to start somewhere very big, but start with what you understand, or start with something that you're going to try. And sometimes, half seriously, I've said to people, even if you start by selling t-shirts to friends and family, even that's a good start, because at least it teaches you the basics of business. And the basics of business are the same, whether it's a small business or a large business. It really doesn't matter. So I would say definitely make a start. Don't wait. And sometimes it's totally okay to start while you have a job running on the side. I think sometimes we are also worried, oh, what happens if I'm not successful? Well, for a while, you can have your job running in parallel. So you'll just have to work longer hours. You'll just have to work late into the night so that you're sort of sailing in two boats and don't fall off. Another thing that I have noticed, particularly, and I've learned it from the people who run accelerators or incubators, that they have started to insist that you have at least 2 co-founders starting a company. And I think it is very important that you have at least one more co-founder with you. There are lots of reasons for it. The obvious ones are complementary skills, but also I think temperaments. One person could be really good at going out and getting business. The other person could be really good at managing the back office and making sure that the company runs and delivers and does all that. These are just simple examples. There are so many other reasons. One person would have good connections, the other on one side of the house, the other person could have other. But I think more importantly, it's also important that when there are ups and downs in the business, which there will be many, that there are 2 of you who are holding fort. Everybody else will look to you, whether it's your employees, whether it's your board of directors, whether if you've taken a loan from the bank, they will look to the founders. It's always good to have emotional support as well. And Finally, I think when you're getting your business off the ground, be prepared that there will be opposition from unexpected quarters, including your family. And many times the family might even think that you're doing something too risky, and it endangers the financial security of the family. So be prepared for that, and not just be prepared, have a plan of how you plan to address that. How will you get through the first 1 or 2 years when you may have little or no revenue from your own business? Obviously, a very common question is, what problem will your business solve? And this is what I slightly alluded to in what I learned from my failure, that you could have innovation in so many different ways, and the differentiation can be in the business model itself and not necessarily in the product or service. And I've been trying to think of some examples, and I'll start with a few easy ones. So if you're a physiotherapist, you can be in a very crowded market. But if you say I'm a physiotherapist, but I deal with sports injuries, you're already differentiating yourself. Likewise, so many of you are coaches. But if you just go to the market and say, look, I'm a coach, people will find it hard to say, okay, so what are you good at? And if you start segmenting the market and saying, look, my experience is in tech, or my experience is in HR, my experience is with growth companies and I help them, or my experience is with first-time managers and I really help them understand what it means to be a manager, you're already differentiating yourself. And there may be more layers of differentiation that you may require. But the key message I want to bring out here is, do get into something where you can be differentiated. That allows many things. Firstly, it gets you a better audience. I also think it leads to higher margins because you're able to charge more. And because you are able to charge more, you're also able to grow faster, because now you have the financial resources to grow your business. If you had to hire 2 more employees into your coaching practice because you are able to charge a higher premium because you're specialized, I think that helps. And likewise, if you're running a business, if you're able to run a higher margin business, I think your resilience is more, particularly in a bad time, or on the flip side, being able to invest. So that is one thing. The other thing I would say is, once you've sort of got your business off the ground, build it in such a way that it can be made bigger scaled. Because once it starts to run smoothly, which takes a few months, few years, depending on what you're in, at least it should not be constrained by it's in a very small niche or it's in a very small part of the market and you really cannot grow it. So those are some sort of practical tips that I have for getting your business off the ground. And I see KP is back.
Yeah, there is one question from Anuradha. She's saying the feeling of not being enough is very discouraging for first-time entrepreneurs. What's your advice on what the focus should be in those initial years to overcome this?
So can you just repeat what is meant by not being enough? Can you just repeat that for me?
The feeling, okay, do I have the enough expertise? Do I have the enough wherewithal? Right? Some limitations pull you down, right? It's just probably in your mind, but then that is very discouraging, especially for first-time entrepreneurs. If you've already done something in the past, then you know how to overcome them.
Yeah. And I would say, yes, that is likely to be a very common feeling. But the only way to overcome that is in a few ways. Firstly, choose a line that you have at least some expertise in. It need not be in exactly what you do today, because maybe that's not a good business idea, but it could be in an adjacent area or any area where at least 60-70% of your prior knowledge is useful. So you have a core that you can start with, and you don't know too much about it. The other is also that you can maybe start small and learn the ropes of that business. You don't necessarily have to go huge, make big commitments and then do that. I also think that this is one place where having mentors, advisors, friends who have been in your related area can help. I can share with you my example. I'm not a computer science graduate. I'm an MSc in physics and an MBA in marketing. Nowhere close to people who in the early years went to NIT and became the IT people, right? Later there were many more options. But the company I ran was entirely IT. And I used to say that we can charge $300 an hour from a customer for some of our people, but nobody would give me $10 an hour because there's nothing I can do by way of coding or being in IT. But that did not prevent us from running an IT company. We learned what was critical for the business. And this is another angle which this question throws up. That do you really need to know everything of the business you're starting? Or can you run it as a business? In which case you can at some stage either hire co-founders or other employees if you can afford them, who bring in the expertise that you don't have. And I can tell you, again from my example, we had IT people who were way smarter than us, who understood IT, and we had enough management skill to understand what they were saying and give direction or give approval. But we were not the IT guys. Both of us co-founders were not IT. So I don't know if that answered the question, but I'd be happy to take a follow-on to this question if there are more questions, maybe at the end of the session when we come to Q&A.
Sure. The message is clear that, you need to find a complementing skill or knowledge that you can, add to a repertoire. I think that's what it is. There's actually another question on your point on scalability, right? So Akshat is asking, what are some scalable and non-scalable examples, and in especially in the coaching industries, and how do we differentiate between them?
See, in the coaching industry, I would say, and I do have a few friends who have done it, so I've seen some of that. One, the industry itself is not scalable or not scalable. I think it is whether you treat it as a business or not. So I'll tell you, using coaching as an example. If your mindset is that everything has to be done by me, and I'm the coach and I have the technical expertise or HR expertise or whatever expertise, then you will remain non-scalable. Because then only what you can do will be what your firm can deliver. And if you now extend that example to say, I'm treating it like a business, I'm in the business of coaching. And what if there is more opportunity? So I go to a customer and my skill is in tech coaching, but the customer is asking me, hey, I'm looking to do an HR org design. There are two ways of dealing with it. No, I don't do it. The other is, yes, of course. And then you bring in somebody else, then it becomes a business for you. Now, the person you bring in need not be your co-founder, could be just a partner. But you go in under your banner, and then you could have 4 of them like that in different skill areas. One could be in benefits and compensation, becomes a business. Now, whether you make them co-founders or you just leave them at arm's length and you do like they become your subcontractors is up to you. So that's so whether a business is scalable or not is part of that. I'll give you a completely unrelated example. If you're running if you're running a single store, let's assume it's a shop you're running, that shop is scalable only to a certain extent. Because the foot traffic, how much revenue you can make, let's say you can make, a few lakhs a month, but it'll be restricted by the geography, it'll be restricted by that. But if you were to think of it as a chain store, then it suddenly becomes scalable. So the same idea could be scalable or not scalable depending on. There is another idea, another area where if the niche that you're in is very small and there's very little demand for it, then that may be something that will not be scalable. I don't have a ready example for that, but I can just think that there could be areas that you're in such a specialized skill or specialized area of coaching or business or whatever that the demand for that itself is very low.
Sure. Thank you. I think there are a lot of other questions, but I think we'll reserve them towards the end.
Sure. And I do appreciate the fact that people are asking questions. It does make the session more interesting for me as well. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit, and if there is some repetition in this, I'll try to speed it up. So what are some things that can make you successful? I think continuously move up the value chain and avoid commoditized offerings. I think we discussed this. There is really no reason for me to go over that again. The message is clear. I also think that you should invest in brand building, and even if you're a one-person brand, how do you present yourself down to I'll give you a very simple example. I see so many people who start their own businesses, but they have a Gmail account. And it is really, I mean, if you are serious about your business, at least get an email ID which is not Gmail. If you're running a business, if you're using it for personal use and friends and family, that's fine. So, and brand building even goes to the how you position yourself in the market, which we discussed earlier. Even how you make presentations. Is your PowerPoint professional? There are so many elements that go into brand building. And I think one of the strongest things for coaching professionals could be, are you seen as a thought leader? If you are seen as a thought leader, your brand in the coaching business will be way higher, because people think that this person is an original thinker, brings new thinking to the issues. And I put that under how you as a brand are sort of seen by the market. So that's one thing that I would do that. However, if you are scaling up beyond yourself, then I would say you should try to attract the best talent. And one of the things that I have practiced in the past is always to overhire. So if I was hiring for a position of, let's say, manager, I would bring in somebody or hire somebody who was actually capable of becoming a senior manager and director, and not look at him only or look at her only for that role. So do try to get good talent. And in fact, smaller companies, smaller businesses, smaller firms need that even more than bigger. In bigger companies, average or moderate talent can hide. But in a smaller firm, sort of poor quality talent has no place to run and hide. It will be visible to you, to your customers, and it will do you a lot of harm. And finally, there is one thing that I think there are lots of views on it. My view is that you can create a demanding yet caring culture. And I think a lot of people think that if you're demanding, then you have to be in your face and tough and all those usual things that one thinks of. But I can give you any number of examples where I think at Utopia, we had a demanding culture. We held people accountable for what they were doing, but we were also caring, and people appreciated that. And I would go to the extent of saying that even today, I've exited Utopia 2 years ago. Even today, people call me sometimes out of the blue and said, from the stock options you gave us, I made the down payment for my home, which tells me that our relationship with them was not just about business. Hey, what did you deliver today? But what are you doing later? How is your family? Can we help you? And there were many situations where we went out of our way to help people deal with personal emergencies of all kinds. So please, my message to managers is that you can create a very demanding culture and yet be very caring, and both should go together. In terms of some other things, out execute your competitors, and I mean that assuming that your business model is now in place, you are doing well, but make sure that your execution is really good, and people really notice that. I mean, how many times have you gone to a really good restaurant and if the server doesn't do a good job, you are left with a bad taste in the mouth, literally. But in a similar restaurant somewhere else, you get really good service. So both restaurants that you visited could have the same offering product-wise, but the service levels can be very different. And same for airlines as an example. They all buy the same planes. But one airline is rated higher, one airline is able to charge more, one airline is on time, one airline does things like that. So I would say always out execute. Leverage alliances to extend reach. I think this really means partnerships and stuff that we partly discussed. Not in the context of just having co-founders, but having alliances. And since many of you are coaches, having alliances with other coaches who have complementary skills, who are in different cities where face-to-face may be required, is something that you should seriously consider, because it will give you, back to the scale question, it can actually give you scale without necessarily investing heavily in it. However, I do want to point out one thing, and I've seen that with some friends who are coaches. they are very scared to share something like a customer or a new opportunity with somebody else. I think you have to be very confident of yourself, of what you do, the relationship you have with your customer, and why you can bring somebody else in. And it is only through trust that you can build those alliances, because those are not ownership oriented. Those are alliances. So I would recommend, and it will not work with everybody. You may be a very trusting person and the other person is not, so that will not work. But try to build alliances where you can work with each other, bring business to each other, or even go for advice. After your coaches, you can also need advice. So do that. Watch your expenses always. I mean, I think especially when we have a good year, we tend to loosen the purse strings and we start spending more. And that's a good thing to do, but just make sure that you don't outspend yourself. Finally, even though it's the last point, I think it's a key point. Whether you're doing your own business or you have a team of people, you're running a small business or a big business, you do need to have proper performance metrics and dashboards. There is no way in today's world that you can run a company just by hunch and just by seat of your pants, as the saying goes. And again, I can share with you, since we were running in many ways an IT company, we would review everything every week. So we would have Monday morning calls. So basically everything got reviewed 52 times a year. And not everything. There were things which were reviewed once a quarter and things which were reviewed once a month. But key things like sales and delivery and operations and finance should be looked at frequently. I leave the decision to you as to whether your business requires, monthly or weekly or fortnightly or annual. Annual is too long, I think, in today's environment. But do have proper dashboards, even if they are Excel file. Definitely do that. I touched upon this a little bit earlier as one of the things that I learned from my failed venture, but cash flow is everything. There's a saying in the business world that companies don't run out of business, companies run out of cash. So whether it is you as an individual owner running out of cash to support your family, or you're running a business and you're running out of cash, any which way, you need to watch that. Do not look only at your P&L. Your P&L will show that you're profitable, but your money is still with your customers. So please definitely look at that. And one thing I found many first-time entrepreneurs very hesitant to go to a bank for a line of credit. They almost assume that it will be denied. And I think whether it is friends, family, banks, and especially banks who may be more tuned towards small businesses, you should go and do that. Because trying to get money in through a venture capitalist or a PE fund is much more expensive in other ways. You lose equity, and you don't want to do that. So I would say that even at any stage of your growth, particularly when you can project growth, you will need more money. And I would say you should start talking to bankers and at later stages to VCs when you're ready for that, before you need the money. Don't run to somebody when you have 1 month of cash left. Try to do that 6 months in advance, 4 months in advance, because people take time and people also want to see how you're doing. So it gives them a little bit of a runway to say, okay, I saw this company in January and I'm seeing this company in May and they're doing well. So, okay, I can then let them some money. And finally, customers. I think very often we do not ask our customers for advances. We are hesitant. So many people, even big companies, are hesitant. And they think that asking for money shows weakness, or you don't have enough money, or you're too small. Well, none of that. You should ask for money. You are delivering a service. The customer owes you timely payments, and in this case, even an advance. In IT companies, it is not unusual to ask for a mobilization advance. And I can tell you that from our experience, the largest amount that we received as an advance was $3 million, which completely changed the cash flow for our company. And one other time we received $2 million. And of course, we were always asking for 20% advance, which sometimes would get negotiated down to 10% or 15%, which was fine. A negotiation is fine, but get some advance. I also think that when a customer pays you advance, that customer is going to be much more serious with you, which is good for you. And one other thing, let's assume the customer says, no, I do not have a policy of giving advance at all. So you're at a dead end, you can't do anything at that stage. But one of the things that you could do is to say, okay, but I need tighter payment terms. Fine, you can't give me an advance, but give me payment terms of 30 or 45 days, not 90 days, not 180 days. And one of the suggestions I have, again, since I said I'll give you some practical suggestions, if a customer has delayed your payment for too long, be prepared to stop serving that customer. Absolutely. And you don't have to do it suddenly, but you have to inform the customer and say, look, if I don't get your money by such and such day, I will have to stop serving you. Now, if you're selling a product, you may have to say, I'll stop the product from being given to you. If you're performing a service, you can say, look, if I'm a coach and I'm coaching you, look, I'll have to stop those till I get paid. There is no shame. There is no reason you should not be asking for that. And as I said, it also gives you a longer runway before you go to a venture capitalist or a PE fund for asking for money. So you actually generate money from your own business, which you can reinvest, make the business better, or at least be more comfortable cash-wise.
And there's one question that's coming up. This whole concept of asking for an advance, it's very difficult for first-time entrepreneurs sometimes. They think it's below them to even ask that. Are there any personal anecdotes that you've gone through which has helped you ask it in a very nicer way?
So I think, yes, I completely understand the hesitation of asking, and particularly if you are a first-time entrepreneur. But I think it has to be, one way of dealing with it is it has to be part of your proposal. So it's not something you spring after the deal is done. It's not like you come later and say, oh, I'm going to stop. I'm going to also ask you for advance. So let's say you're sending your first proposal and it has commercials. Oh, I'm going to charge you so many thousands or lakhs, whatever, and payment terms are 30 days, and I need a mobilization advance of, let's say 20%. Let's start with 20. You can always go down. When it is part of the proposal, I think it will get greater attention and less. It is part of the way you do business. And you will initially maybe get a few setbacks. And as I said, some company may say, oh, I do not give advances to anybody. My purchasing policy doesn't allow me, which is fine. But maybe then the next question is, okay, can you give me 30 days payment terms? And again, I'm seeing somebody saying that stop giving services is taboo in India. I understand that. But I do think that at some stage, the customer has to realize that it's not a free ride. You have to. And I can tell you, we dealt with a lot of Middle Eastern customers. They were large companies, oil and gas companies and all that. And they did not treat their vendors well. But we always got an advance from them, and we got paid on time. And we also threatened some of the largest companies in the world, happened only 3 or 4 times, that we will, so the way we threatened was we will stop sending people on site, we will continue working off site. Just like escalation point number 1. So I'm sure in your business also there will be different escalation points. You can say, look, I'm going to stop this part of my service if this doesn't happen. And if the risk is of not winning that business again, I don't think that customer is necessarily worth your while. If you keep supporting that customer and run out of cash, you will have a different problem to deal with. So there is no easy answer for this. And you have to test the market yourself. But the only message I can leave you with is, please try it. Don't assume it can't be.
There's a follow-on on that. Do you think there is a risk of not even being shortlisted when you ask for an advance? But I guess you already answered that. Give it a try. Who knows? They may ask.
Give it a try. And I hope that your customer is not selecting you on the basis of your payment term.
Yeah. True.
And if you have a good proposal, you have a good reason, back to are you differentiated? Do you have a differentiated offering? Then you will clear that. Also, at least in the larger companies, people do a technical evaluation first and a commercial evaluation next. So get through the technical evaluation. If you are already shortlisted on the technical evaluation, then chances are that they will also want to conclude a contract with you. Now, will there be some companies which will totally deny it? Yes, there will be, and that's a decision you can make at that point in time. As I said, if nothing else, negotiate better payment terms. You can say, okay, I will do this for you because you're giving me business, but give me 30 days payment terms. Right, as an example.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, let me go to the next one. And I see some more questions popping up, but we can take them towards the end of the session. I'm not trying to rush through. This is another question that comes up. Should I sell my business? And the answer is, and I'm sort of giving you a slightly different answer to start with, that business is not built keeping the exit strategy in mind. You build a business that you believe in, and you build a business that is valuable, and you build a business that has value to your customers. And then later you come up with an exit strategy. If you think that you've now run it for 5, 10, 15 years, and you don't want to keep running it, or you want to monetize, which is a totally valid reason, that there's value in the company, which is still virtual, but you would like to see that as being in your bank account rather than leaving it as value in the company. So, and the example I can give you is that sometimes people say, oh, I'm going to start a company which SAP will one day buy from me, or some other big company will buy from me. And I can tell you that generally doesn't work out like that. So you have to build a company that will be valuable, and then SAP or some other big company will come and buy you out. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other suggestion I have, which is similar to the one I gave for line of credit, that if you are looking at selling your company, then engage with potential investors early on. And the reason I say early on is because it gives you time and gives them time. And especially if you're a growing company, and let's say you start with them in January, and by February, March, April, you have meetings with them, and they see growth, I think they're more confident of working with you and making an offer to you. The other part is that build a very capable and credible management team. I'm assuming that you're at least a small or mid-sized business. You're not an individual when I'm having this discussion, because the acquiring company assumes that the founders at some stage will leave. And I think everybody realizes that founders make very poor employees because they're so used to running the company their way. They don't always adapt well to somebody else's management team. So make sure that you build a management team, at least a few people, depending on your size, who will continue with the company even when you might leave after a few months of handing over. And then the last thing is the strategic versus financial investors. Strategic investors are those who are running operating companies and see you as being additive to their business, whereas financial investors are people like private equity funds who are there primarily for financial gain. Of course, they bring some other value to you. And typically, strategic investors theoretically pay more because they know how to leverage your business than others. But which one you will get, very hard to predict, because when you go out to market, you're likely to check both. And as part of that, especially if you're doing a formal process, you'd have to engage an investment banker, and then the investment banker will also take you to different both strategics and financial investors. And finally, timing is everything. So choose your timing, and one way of choosing the timing is to start early, not leave it to the very end. This is almost my last slide, and I want to say that entrepreneurship is a marathon, not a sprint. So get into it thinking that this is going to be a long run. You need to have more the qualities of a camel than that of a horse, because horses are good for sprints and camels are good for marathons. And I want to share a few things on the personal side. These are nothing to do with entrepreneurship as such, but these are related to entrepreneurship. And I would say that keeping your body, mind, and soul together is going to be very critical. You're going to have 12 to 14-hour days. Depending on your business, you may end up traveling a lot. And then keeping everything together is going to be hard. So one of the things that I recommend is that as busy as you are, make sure that you exercise every day. That's the only way you'll keep your body, mind, and soul together, particularly your body and mind, because when you exercise, you keep your body in good condition, but it also is a stress reliever. So your mind also is in a better condition. You also get relief from everything that you're working during the day. So whether you're a morning person, evening person, make sure that you exercise every day. And I can share with you that from the time we started our company and started traveling, we did have to travel a lot. I used to travel 300,000 miles a year and be on the road almost 150 days a year. And one rule we had was that we need not stay in an expensive hotel, but we need to stay in a hotel which has a gym and a workout area. So we would, even during our travel, most of us, senior managers, co-founders, would always exercise. So I would strongly recommend that. The fact that you're going to be very busy doesn't mean that you should not exercise. In fact, it's the other way around. Because you're going to be very busy, you should exercise. Finally, in terms of the family, I think all of us have received several Facebook posts and several WhatsApp messages that you should not miss out on family while you're busy with work, whether it is entrepreneurship, employment, whatever. And I think there are, I cannot stress that enough. And one of the very simple things that I can share with you, which I did throughout my difficult work time at Utopia, was even during travel, would always call my wife once a day. It didn't matter which part of the world I was in, whether it was morning or evening. And WhatsApp made it even easier. You didn't have to make an international call. And I'd speak to my children 2-3 times a week, even while I was traveling. And I know that some of my colleagues picked that tip up from me, and they started doing that. And I think you really bridge the gap when you do some of these things. These are not tricks. These are really tips which help and make it possible to stay connected with the family. You don't want to be 20 years later, I don't even know how my children grew up. Likewise, on the professional side, what do you do? Because it's a marathon. And I think being connected to such groups like ICF are critical. For me personally, it was the Indus Entrepreneur. I learned a lot by going to those things. One of the interesting things that I learned is that there would be a lot of founders there sharing their stories very openly. And it gave me the courage that, look, the troubles that I'm facing are not unique. And maybe other people are going through that. And then you also hear people sharing their experiences and you pick up a few nuggets. But in addition to that, I think you also pick up technical knowledge. You pick up what's happening. And I remember one where we actually started artificial intelligence and machine learning in our company back in Bangalore in 2016, because I attended a number of sessions at TiCon in Santa Clara where machine learning and everything was coming back. So I would say you should really be doing that. And then finally, make sure that not only you leverage coaches, mentors, but also that you, keep abreast of new developments, depending on your industry, but even otherwise in general. This is really my last slide, as I promised. And to me, if you kickstart your business, you actually create your own future. So instead of creating your business, I've restated it to say kickstart your business and create your own future that you can then rely on. KP, this is sort of the formal end of my presentation. I have shared my LinkedIn. I would be happy to hear from people who have joined today, and open to any more Q&A and comments. KP, over to you.
Sure, Narinder. So first of all, I think I should take a minute and read out some of the comments before I really ask you. I think a lot of them have told that this is very practical, very realistic, grounded session, not a very theoretical 30,000 feet high kind of a session where you just don't cover the peripherals and don't get inside. And thank you very much for for all the wisdom that you shared with us. That's the comment that I'm noticing from all through the participants. Coming to
Thank
questions,
you.
I made note of some of those questions. Let me actually read through some of them. Very interesting. There's one on where you mentioned about you started the IT company despite being from a non-IT background. And there's a question, basically a comment, isn't domain expertise really critical? How do you really handle that, even if you're not from that background? How do you handle that?
So you do need to handle it. I agree with that. But this is the difference between knowing it yourself and running a business. So if you are running a business, then you need to understand the dynamics of that business and not necessarily, and you do need to understand the domains. I'll give you one or two live examples of what I had to learn. So when we started, we did not necessarily start. We started with data cleansing and data enrichment, which was relatively easy. And then we thought that we should do it for SAP customers, and we got into data migration. So I had to learn data migration. Hey, what does data migration mean? And then what is SAP? And I didn't know the difference between SAP, ABAP, and Basis, and PM, plant maintenance, and FICO, and all those modules. Nothing. I had no background to that. But then you go along and you learn, and say, okay, this is what it is. And let's say you're having a discussion with your HR team, and you need to hire. You need to know enough to say, okay, we're looking for an ABAP developer, or are we looking for Basis? Or are we looking for somebody who has plant maintenance experience? So you need to have that much understanding. Or are we looking for people who have other technical skills? So it is possible, but it comes with the caveat that you need other people who are smarter than you in understanding that domain at a deeper level than you do.
So it's complementary.
Yes,
you need to
yes.
find that complement. Sure. So there's one question from Sandeep. He says, big fish eat small fish. So are startups always have an opportunity for bigger businesses taking over? If yes, does it help in growing the startups more rapidly?
So startups, I'm going to restrict my comment to IT startups because I have more experience of that. I think IT startups don't have any problem in growing as long as they don't start bidding against the big fish. So when you start bidding against the big fish, you start getting noticed. And this happened to us, and I'm sure this has happened to all IT startups at a certain scale, which is also okay. You get thing. And then you start reaching a situation because you're so specialized that you actually start beating the big fish in winning business in your. So when it came to data migration, when it came to master data governance, we would beat people like Accenture. We would beat people like IBM. We would beat people like TCS. TCS, my most famous example is about 4 years ago. We won a business against them in Dallas, Texas, at 30% more price than them. So then you start getting into that. At that stage, you have a choice. You can either keep growing the business yourself, but at a certain stage competing, because now the big guys are beginning to compete with you and against you, you either have to take the business much bigger, in which case maybe you should ask for more private equity and strategic investors. Or, I mean, if you don't do that, then you do run the risk that the big guys can run you into the ground. So it is a choice at that stage. So for example, in our case, we made the choice that, okay, we had run the company for 18 years. We had our 14-hour days and 300,000 miles a year. We were ready to sell. And we were bought by a much bigger company. So yes, the question is valid, and how you deal with it depends on what your motivations are. But the big guys will start noticing. By the way, incidentally, it is good if the big guys start noticing you, because sometimes you can also do alliances with them. We did win business with and through Accenture as an example, through SAP Consulting as an example. So it's not just one-way street.
Yeah. So the way to look at it is this and that rather than this or that. So probably there's always a chance of collaboration.
Yes.
Now that you brought up the point of price and the margins, there's one question from Rahul. How do you price your product when it is intangible like coaching? It's not tangible.
So firstly, I think there have to be, the way I would answer that is that there are two things and you have to triangulate in a way. You have a cost plus model. Hey, this is what my hour or my day's worth, right? A cost plus, this is the minimum I need to do that, right? The other is a market-based pricing, where you do have your cost plus, and I'm more in favor of market-based pricing, because if you are offering a service that can be charged higher, then you should. You should not just have a standard formula to say, I'll do cost plus 30% and that's my formula. So in coaching also, depending on where you are on the value chain, it's very hard for me to define that, but if you are providing, let me say, if you're providing coaching to MDs and C-suite versus providing coaching to middle-level managers and senior managers, you should be able to price higher. And you should. I do think that we sometimes ignore the fact that something that is priced too low is seen as cheap. So you have to have a balance between being worth or valued for what you're doing, and even in a coaching scenario, if you are coaching C-level versus mid-level, I think you should be able to price higher and you should test. The other thing I would say is you should always test the market with a little more. There is no harm in testing the market. You can always drop your price at the final negotiation, or you can give extra. By the way, one other simple tip I would share, where it applies to small companies, big companies, IT, coaching. If your price, let's say your rate is X rupees per hour and the customer is finding it high, but wants to deal with you, you can say, look, I don't drop my rate, but I'll give you 10 extra hours. So your rate gets established in the market with the customer, and the customer feels, okay, this person really believes in his or her rate and is not willing to discount, but is willing to give me a few extra hours. So again, no fixed answer for this.
Thank you. You brought up the whole concept of trying, right? So the other way also works, and that's what Mandar and Sandeep saying, that okay, there are corporations that say we want to try your services first for free,
yes,
and then we will see if we can pay you.
I have a very good answer for that, because I've tried it, and I'll tell you that answer. Firstly, never do anything for free. That's my first answer, and that's not the answer anybody wants to hear on this call, because they say, oh, then I won't get the business. But there are ways around it. One is to charge a very small amount, and I'll tell you why I even say charge a rupee. Because when the other guy has to pay you something, he has to go up and down the chain to get approval. You don't want to be dealing with a mid-level manager, even a director level manager, who doesn't have the authority to sign your PO when the pilot is successful. So you want to cover that now. So what happens if my pilot is successful? Do I have an order? Have we agreed on everything? If the answer is yes, that's one. The other thing that I have tried, now that doesn't mean that you never do free. There may be reasons when you should do free. So I'm not saying never do it. But the other thing you can do is to say, I'm going to charge you nominal sum. Let's say 25,000 rupees. But if you give me the final order, 50% of the 25 I'll give you back in your final, in my final quote, which is here. So let's say my quote is already there. I'll comp you 50% of what you paid me now. So there are ways around it of doing that. But I'm personally not in favor of totally free, because I think you are dealing with a level in a company who doesn't have the authority to approve your order. And therefore, once your POC is successful, you do not have the next go forward plan. So insist on some money, even 1 rupee.
Sure. Thank you. Very practical way of handling it. And Emmy has a question. What are the typical blind spots of an entrepreneur? We have seen many derail lately.
Yeah. I think there are multiple blind spots people can have. One is to be unaware of the dangers that lurk around you, or just a lack of awareness. That is one. I think another blind spot that people typically have is they start believing, as they say, their own press. They start believing that, oh, we are doing extremely well, and not realize that there may be holes in their delivery or sales or whatever. And I think if you are running, let's say with a team of people, so it will be small or big team, another blind spot could be that you're the smartest guy in the room. And anything that anybody else says to you, you don't listen to. And this happens at very large companies as well. It happens in countries as well, where people stop listening to their advisors. So I think there are a number of blind spots that all of us have, and the only way we can be saved from them is to be aware that there could be blind spots, and if nothing else, listen to other people, and especially people who challenge you. In fact, I would go to the extent of saying, if you have a strong team and you have people who've been with you for several years, and they are challenging you on something, they are doing it from the goodness of the heart. They are doing it because they believe in the company. They are not doing it because, oh, we want to challenge you. And most people miss that point. And if you listen to that, I can give you any number of examples where there were proposals that I disagreed with, and I said, I don't want to do it. And then later I said, okay, since you are doing it, so this thing will start, and go and do it, execute. And we did well. And it just told me that my initial hesitation of doing that was not the right thing. So I do think listening to your key management people. And lastly, not to belabor the point, make sure as a co-founder, and I'm now assuming you're a bigger company, maybe 50 people, 100 people, make sure that you connect with the lowest level of employee personally, not through HR. I can tell you that I knew the cleaning staff of my Bangalore office by name. I knew which one had been admitted to hospital and was covered by ESI and therefore did not get anything paid. I changed the insurance policy of the company to cover people, take them out of ESI, put them onto insurance. Why? Because I spoke to this lady, Jyoti, at the staircase. So again, we'll prevent blind spots, to answer that question.
Thank you. Very practical. Amit Chennai asks, how do you plan for a sudden exit of a co-founder, courtesy death or accident or change in their preference or alignment?
So there are a number of things you should be doing. Firstly, and these are real scenarios, right? I mean, in addition to that, there could be a voluntary exit. Maybe somebody gives up. Yeah. I'm currently dealing with a situation in one of my my portfolio companies, where the two co-founders are not getting along and one is threatening to leave. So that is a real risk, in addition to death or other reason or illness. So I think one is that, again, back to is there enough depth in the management team, or even if it is 2 or 3 people, small team, can other people pick up? That is one. Secondly, if there is some kind of scenario planning that, hey, if this were to happen, what are we going to do? For bigger companies, there are other avenues open, such as building a management team, having other people who can step into that role. There is also key man insurance as an example. So if you have key man insurance and somebody, your co-founder, somebody were to die, you'd get a few $1 million, so that you can at least use that to hire somebody else or go through a period of difficulty. But I think looking ahead and planning for it is one of the things. As an aside, I would say, one thing that I would suggest co-founders do is always have a vesting schedule of their own shares, which could be over 4 years or 5 years. So if a co-founder leaves in year 2 or let's say year 2, and it's a 4-year vesting schedule, he or she should lose 50% of his or her equity, because not stayed long enough to help build the company. And this does happen in companies. Some co-founders either get disillusioned, it's a tough life, they don't want to do it. So have a vesting schedule even for co-founders.
So one question from Dr. Pramod, he's asking, how do you build trust in this so-called dog-eat-dog world?
Very, very interesting question. You build trust by creating trust. And how do you create trust is by being forthright, by being honest, by being authentic, all different terms that people use. But it is back to telling the truth. And I can share with you how we built trust in Utopia. As I said, we had 650 people. We had more than our due share of downturns, more than our due shares, because we were in IT, and IT is also very susceptible to downturns. And one of the things I can tell you, which I did personally and my other co-founder also did personally, is when there was bad news to be shared, including retrenchment, we would stand in front of our people and share that news. We would not leave it to HR. We would not leave it to somebody else. We would stand in front of our team. I've done those sessions in Bangalore, fortunately only once or twice, and stand there and say, we are in a bad spot. We have to lay off some people, but here is the plan going forward. There will be no more retrenchments going forward. Treat your people well. And even people who are leaving, make sure they get extra health insurance, make sure they get full payment, pay their bonuses. So you build trust by your actions, not by what you do. And there are so many different ways. I'll give you another simple example. You're the CEO of the company, and you're the founder, co-founder, and somebody sends you an email. Do you respond to that email or not? Simple. If you want your employee to respond to your email midnight, daytime, holiday, are you going to reciprocate that? That builds trust. The other person realizes that if I write to Narinder, I'll get a response within a few hours. When I need to reach out to him to say, I need you to do this, he's going to be ready for it because I was there when he wanted some help or she wanted some help.
Yeah, got it. Message loud and clear. Sandeep Kulkarni is asking, how much percentage of own funds should I put in the startup and rest from other sources? Is it beneficial in the long run?
I can answer it in a generic way. The more equity you can keep with you for longer, the better you are. And the reason is that you can, and assuming you're scaling the company and you're going to, sell it at some stage, etc. So I'm assuming that thing.
Yeah.
So put in as much money as you can afford without being out on a limb, but try to be protective of your equity. It is easier to go out in the market in some ways, convince some people to give you equity or give you, and again, between equity and loans, I would say where possible, take loans. Where needed, take equity. Balance the two so you don't lose. The one scenario you want to avoid is that you're selling the company and now you own only 5%. So avoid that scenario. You will get diluted as you grow because more people will come in and you will need that money to grow. So you can be a smaller part of a bigger pie, which is fine, but don't become irrelevant. So be cautious is what I would say. Take only when absolutely needed.
Sure. Yeah. Natarajan has asked a couple of questions. First one is, when we start a business for the first time, right, and normally there isn't any track record built, customers ask for a reference. Right?
Yes.
How do we handle, how do we convince them when there is no track record yet built?
So the first 2, 3, 4 customers are the hardest to get. Absolutely the hardest. Because your company has no credentials, you yourself have no credentials. My answer to that is that you use whatever you have done till that time as your credentials. To say, so let's say you are in HR and you are working for a large company and you handle their HR globally or regionally or whatever, those are your credentials. And if you have team members, let's say you're starting with co-founder, then everybody uses their credentials. That is one part of the answer. And I don't know what else to do. The other thing you can do is to use references of other people that this person respects. To say, look, I'll give you 4 names of people I have worked with. And you can be honest and say, guys, this is a new business I've started. But here is an ex-manager, here is an ex-colleague, here is, somebody asked me what I can say, hey, talk to KP. KP has seen my work. He knows what I am. So don't say I have no references. Give personal references and then give references of other people that this person may know. And finally, you have to say, look, you have to give me a chance. I'm going to try to do it. Yeah, and it is your first 2, 3 will be the hardest to get.
I think we have time for just last 2 questions. Is one question again from Natarajan. He says, how do we overcome the very first failure or the very first rejection or no response from a customer you've been pursuing for a very long time? Because that's the first time and it fails.
So firstly, you should not have only one lead that you're following on. You should have more than one lead, because lead closure is a math, right? Only a certain number of leads will close. So to use the old phrase, don't put all your eggs in the same basket and now wait for that one customer to come back and save your life. That is very risky. So you do need at least a few leads running at any given time. I think, but to answer the question differently, you do need to analyze why that customer said no to you. Did you lose it to somebody else? Did you lose it on price? Did you lose because I'll tell you one common reason we lose deals is we did not understand the customer's requirements properly. We did not even go back and ask the customer, have I understood your requirements correctly? So let's say I have meeting 1 and I take down the requirements. And now I go back, before I submit the proposal, I should go back to the customer and say, do you have time for me to revalidate that? I have some questions while I'm building the proposal, right? So I have a few questions around that. And you go back and revalidate, that's one. So you do need to analyze that. And then if you have lost, depending on your customer, it is totally okay to go back and ask the customer, can you share with me why I lost? And I have done that personally, both to customers that I lost, and I've also done it with customers where I won. And I've gone to them and said, why did we win? It's a very silly question to ask, why did we win? But people give you all kinds of reasons as to why you won. So do analyze that, because it will prevent you from the next failure.
We're almost at the top of the hour, and there is one question I had actually saved, even though it was the first question that came in the Q&A box, because it seemed very futuristic and leading into a different thing. Akshat asks, how will technology like metaverse affect digital coaching business industry?
I think my sort of spontaneous response is that it will actually make it wonderful, because in the metaverse, you can be sitting next to your customer, your client, your coachee, whatever you call him, in a much more real way than you do today in a 2-dimensional video that we are doing today. And you could actually be almost in that person's office, or take a stroll, or walk around, or say, hey, let's go see something else. Let's go for coffee to Starbucks. So I think that whole experience will become enormously enriched. And again, the flip side of that is those coaches who make the effort to stay up to date and make the effort to then leverage metaverse will definitely do better than those who don't. So I would say make the effort to understand it as it grows. It's still very early days, but at least start listening to what people are saying and doing. And I think it will be really wonderful.
Yeah, in fact, there was one comment from a previous session yesterday that, maybe a couple of years down the line, this whole conclave will be on metaverse and we will actually be virtually sitting beside each other. Yes.
I do think so. And I'm in contact with some people who are getting into that, including the company that I invested in, which is into blockchain and NFTs. They're also looking at metaverse. As I said, I'm getting reverse mentored. So I'm a little bit less ignorant than I was last year.
That's so humble of you to accept that. All right. Thank you, Narinder, for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure hearing you, your words, your experiences, your tips and recommendations for first-time entrepreneurs or people who've been there for a while. I'm sure the audience has enjoyed it as much as I have facilitating this, and I hope this was of value to you as well.
Surely it was. It was very delightful. I really thank all the participants for keeping the flow of questions. Otherwise, it would have been a very boring monologue for me and for you. KP, and thanks for you for moderating it. I also want to thank and compliment ICF in general. I think you guys have put in so much effort, including prep, which I was, of course, part of, that I'm sure your sessions are going wonderfully well. And I think a lot of credit goes to the organizing team, some of whom are not visible, some work backstage for doing a really nice job of that.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Narinder. And thank you, everybody, for joining in.